I'm gonna tell you how this farmer's boy created a crazy successful manga, which got adapted into an anime and then won the most prestigious manga award in Japan. Our story begins in Japan's Aichi Prefecture on March 10th, 1991, where a family on the coast of the country just had their third child, Oda Tomohito. Tomohito's early life happened here, in Gamagori, a small city just south of Nagoya. His family was similarly quiet, an edible chrysanthemum farmer with his wife and 3 sons, living in the northern outskirts of the city. As he grew up, Tomohito was sent to Gamagori Shiritsu Gamagori Junior High School and Aichi Kenritsu Mito High School, both schools rated lower than the Pacific Ocean. When he wasn't in school, Tomohito would pursue his painting hobby, and got quite good at it, attracting praise from all the adults around him. But even if he was a painting genius, the idea of pursuing it as a career was something else entirely. How would he make money with it? Where would he make money with it? What if he failed? With all these doubts, it would take a pretty big dose of inspiration to propel Tomohito to the heights he would eventually reach. And where else would anyone get inspiration than from their own brother? What's all the ruckus in here about? Mother, I want to do manga. Tomohito would become utterly obsessed, discovering some of his biggest inspirations and working his tail off until he was granted admission as a manga major to Tokyo's Polytechnic University. He was now in the middle of Japan's capital, the center of manga anime culture, surrounded by his people who were passionate about his passions. Within these 4 years, Tomohito's journey to mangaka stardom officially began. By the time his junior year rolled around, Tomohito had developed his very own one-shot, Waro do was the One, featuring a protagonist who could fly, lift up, and shift, and a cute girl. Tomohito sent this to several publishers in the high hopes that it would be published and his debut would soon follow. But instead he got instantly rejected by the first publisher he sent to, no less. And this publisher was Shonen Jump, the oldest and most famous publisher of them all, which had printed and circulated over 1.6 million copies in his 54-year lifespan. Tomohito had just been crushed, but would he give up? So he kept sending this one-shot to publishers, and he kept getting rejected, over and over and over again. And by the time he had reached Weekly Shonen Sunday, it likely seemed hopeless. But hope would finally surface, as the crew at Weekly Shonen Sunday loved World's Worst One. In fact, they loved it so much that they even sent it as a submission to their Newcomer Comic Award, where it would win its 70th installation while Tomohito was in his senior year. And it's not like this was some throwaway award. Held annually, the Shogakukan Newcomer Comic Award is run by a rotating panel of rather high-profile judges who are incredibly successful mangaka themselves. People like the mangaka behind Detective Conan and the winner of the 2001 Shogakukan National Manga Awards, who thought Tomohito was quite promising, saying that his one-shot's plot was super interesting and that the girls were super attractive. But just an award was not enough to stop Tomohito's grind, as in that same year he wrote his next one-shot, which was shown in the 44th edition of Weekly Shonen Sunday 2012. He would name this one Space Convenience Diary and would feature Mike Wazowski's wife or something like that, I don't know. A year after coming up with this revolutionary character design, Tomohito would finally graduate from uni. And in these exciting times, he decided to go see a friend's graduation project. And as his eyes met the cover, he would be greeted by a cute and scary-looking girl with long black hair. And she was so cute that she stayed in Tomohito's mind. Tomohito's serialization debut would finally begin when he was around 22 with Digicon, a battle comedy involving an alien, the invasion of Earth, and a daughter of a hot spring inn. And this one finally began to pick up steam, becoming Tomohito's longest-running manga for the foreseeable future. It seemed like Tomohito had finally gotten the break he needed, and would use Digicon as the stepping stone for his dream. But not every success is born equal. And I forget the rest of the script. In fact, in spite of its relative success, Tomohito said that he was really uncomfortable drawing the manga, mainly because of the difficulties he had composing battle scenes. So he was faced with a crossroads. He could either keep going or he could kill his darling. And as hard as it was, Tomohito decided to tear the bandage off and killed his creation. Digicon would see its last installment in the 15th issue of Weekly Shonen Sunday 2014. He also changed his pen name to something more familiar, and around this time, the term Komusho started to gain traction in Japan. Seeing how this was a term that hit close to home, Tomohito thought it would be a neat idea to write a manga about communication, featuring this very word. And instead of there being villains in this universe, Tomohito decided he'd rather have characters who had funny pseudonyms as names instead, so that their crimes might be a little bit more acceptable. But when he presented this idea to his editors, they didn't seem too on board with it. I mean, they were on board with the idea, the only issue they had was that the protagonist was a guy. So instead, Tomohito made the protagonist a girl. And then, realizing how cute he thought it was when beautiful girls had trouble communicating, he decided to make the protagonist a beautiful but scary looking girl with long black hair. And Komi Shouko was born. Tall, because her legs were his favorite part to draw. And eventually, after a whole year of workshopping the idea, Tomohito presented the one-shot of Komi San Can't Communicate to the 25th edition of Weekly Shonen Sunday 2015. And luckily for him, it was a hit, and his novel idea would begin its serialization a year later. For the next 2 years, Komi-san was Tomohito's primary project, and through sheer coincidence, it seemed that it might also be his magnum opus. As around the time of the 6th edition of Weekly Shonen Sunday 2018, he was notified that someone wanted to try to adapt Komi-san into an anime. No, I didn't actually find out who this person was specifically, but coincidentally in that same year, the future chief animation director of these animes said on Twitter that he proposed adapting Komi-san into an anime to a certain producer. Whether these two events are the same, I don't actually know. But these timings are quite convenient. Tomohito was now on the precipice of something greater. So close to getting the story he worked on so hard to get broadcasted to the entire world. And it was dangling right in front of him like a carrot on a stick that would eventually be pulled away from him. But even if he was massively disappointed, he had no choice but to keep drawing, since Komi wouldn't draw herself. So he went on, days turning into weeks, weeks turning into months, the months turning into years. It wouldn't be until 2 years later that a glimmer of hope finally surfaced. Because unbeknownst to him, Anime Japan had just held their annual February fan vote for manga we want to see animated. And as Tomohito was going about his daily life, that list came out. And there she was. After this, Tomohito's life started to really pick up pace. Not only did he have his first child in the same year, but his other treasured creation would be picked up by OLM Studio to begin the anime adaptation process, with Koga Aoi and Kajiwara Gakuto voicing the main characters. And 16 whole months after the publishing of that list, the trailer for Komi San Can't Communicate finally came out, with its release date set for a month later. And while this may have been an exciting time for Komi fans, the author himself was shaking with anxiety as this release date approached. How would Komi-san do with the anime community domestically? What about internationally? Would it fail, or would it succeed, or would it just be lost to obscurity? Only time would tell, and that time was fast approaching. But I don't think there's any mystery to how that one turned out. Komi and her gang were an international success. So successful, in fact, that just 2 months later in December, the second season of Guy, Girl, and It was announced, which should be on air by the time this video comes out. Through his own blood, sweat, and tears, Tomohito's manga of 6 years has now reached exorbitant amounts of success, and has just taken one of Japan's most prestigious manga awards as its own. So go give him some love. I mean, he deserves it for all the hard work he's put in to get to this point.